Welcome, everybody. We are honored this evening. We have with us a very special guest. He's a spiritual uncle for me. My spiritual master is Holiness Devamrita Maharaj and Holiness Brahmapad Maharaj. They are God brothers. They're initiated by Srila Prabhupada, Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, who is the author of most of the books that we read here. And Prabhupada Swami, for the last 50 years, maybe more, 52 years, has been practicing Krishna consciousness, originally from New York, and accepted so much responsibility on behalf of Srila Prabhupada. Not easy in this day and age to be in a leadership position, to be a spiritual master, individually to practice and to distribute and accept responsibility for so many disciples and temples and zones and like this tireless. It takes really a special soul to be able to do that in this selfish age that we are in. And Prabhupada Swami Maharaj has been doing that for so many decades, tirelessly, selflessly teaching, like that, and setting example by practicing it himself. I remember when I was a new devotee, maybe like 2000 something, 2001. Maharaj came to Los Angeles temple and he spoke from the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. And I was just like struck. I mean, he's a very person, realized person, so very approachable, very loving. So much can be said about him. I'm just like, feel like so it's totally Krishna's mercy on us that unexpectedly my good friend, devotee friend, Rishabhanu Prabhu said, Prabhupada Swami is available to speak on Sunday. And I was like so happy, this is really Krishna's blessing on us. Because it's hard to approach Krishna, but if we can approach devotee, they easily give us Krishna. So there's really Krishna's blessing on us. We have with us is Holiness Prabhupada Swami this evening. He's going to be speaking on the Bhagavad Gita. And then at the end, if you have any questions, you can ask him. And after the event, we will have dinner. We have dinner for you all across this street in the Yummies. So thank you again for coming. Thank you, Maharaj.
The cafe is called Yummies?
Yummies. So Devamrita Maharaj said Yamunas, and then I told him mostly our customers like Black Americans and hardly any Indians in this area. So he said, okay, Yummies.
Okay. Does it work for the people?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. That's what counts. Is it, I could say it positively or negatively. Is there anyone here who has not yet begun reading Bhagavad Gita? It'll give me an idea of where I'm beginning. Started, but not very far. Okay. Well, a nice place to begin with that in mind is there's Bhagavad Gita is right in the middle of a big text. The big text is a history of Greater India called Mahabharata. And it's mainly history, then there's the philosophical section in the middle. The philosophical section, one way of describing what it is it's describing the yoga system, because there's different yoga practices or yoga systems, and they're compared to like rungs on a ladder, and step by step go to the highest rung on the ladder. And the very beginning of that yoga system starts with understanding who you are. Good start. And the first teaching is where the spark of life within, or the soul, not the covering. So the covering is gross and subtle, gross material body, subtle material body, and then there's the soul, and we belong to the soul category. Then the next concept that's spoken about is, okay, if the concept or the notion is I'm soul, then how do I live my life as a soul? Because I have a body. And the tendency for embodied souls in the human form of life, but in particular, is the material conception of self, and then the material conception of mind. So the material conception of self is I'm the body, and what's mind is what's produced from the body. My property, my work, and then from work I get some income, and from the income I get stuff, and there's my stuff. My home, my shoes, my family members, my bank account, my bills. I and mine is the material conception. So the challenge, a very big challenge to live in a spiritual conception of who we are, is dealing with the fact that we are attached to mind. We're attached to the body is the self, what comes from the body is mind. So that's the next lesson in Bhagavad Gita, is learning how to deal with moving about the world that's temporary while you're an eternal soul, and not being attached to the temporary, dealing with what's in the world, but without the same kind of attachment that comes from material consciousness, the I and mind consciousness. So the Sanskrit word is karma. You've heard that word before, I'm sure. Karma means two things. Action, that's karma, and then comes reaction for the action. Action, reaction is both. So the teaching, this second teaching that comes in Bhagavad Gita, is how to live in the world without thinking of yourself as the creator of your results. So if we're not the creator of the results, what's the creator of the results? I have some role to play. And the teaching in Bhagavad Gita is material nature. Now, it's not complicated. It's just we're dealing with energy around us. We're moving through this energy. And the energy around us, there's a Sanskrit term for it, prakriti, material nature. And material nature moves. It moves it doesn't, sometimes it doesn't move when we want it to move, and sometimes it moves when we don't want it to move. So there's some other entity above material nature that's making energy move or not move. We have a role to play. Walk across the floor, and we drove some time to get over here, and you all, however you got here, and you're going to go back to where you came from. And so we do stuff, but we're not the teaching of Bhagavad Gita. It's subtle, but we're not the cause of action, and we're not the cause of the result of action. We're doing something, but we're not the cause of the action. We're not the cause of the result of the action. It's material nature that does that. So I'm going to, people like a puzzle, or maybe, something that sounds contradictory, but it's not. I'd like to speak about that. Like, who's the doer? If we're not the doer, who's the doer? And what's our role in doing things? Because we have a role. So I'm going to refer to 3 verses in Bhagavad Gita. And if you like, you can look it up in your Bhagavad Gita. So the headline is, who's the doer? So the page number is 164. This is chapter 3. As you see across the top of the right page is Karma Yoga. And the verse reads, the translation, the spirit soul bewildered by the influence of false ego think himself the doer of activities that are in actuality carried out by the 3 modes of material nature. I'll read it again. The spirit soul, that's who we are, bewildered by the influence of false ego, thinks himself the doer of activities that are in actuality carried out by the 3 modes of material nature. So what's the 3 modes of material nature? So the material nature is like, just like I'm looking at the wall, this cream-colored wall. So like there's 3 primary colors, and you mix 3 primary colors and you can make any color. If you know how to mix paints. There's a paint store in New York called Pinchicks. You can bring them a chip of any color, they put it through this machine, and they can make you an exact 1 gallon, very expensive paint. It's exactly the same color as the chip you gave them. Because it's just mixing colors. And they know which colors are mixed, and they can make an exact replica of that color. So as colors mix, make various colors. So Bhagavad Gita teaches the 3 primary modes of nature. When they mix, the modes move material nature. Material, it's like there's a floor. You can rip the floor up. Anyway, you can build a thing. There's creation and there's destruction. Those are 2 modes. Passion creates. Ignorance destroys. And goodness maintains. Those are the 3 modes. And they mix. And material nature is just the stuff that moves according to the movement of the modes of nature. Now, it's an interesting concept. So I'll just read the verse again, the 3rd time. The spirit soul, bewildered by the influence of false ego, thinks himself the doer of activities that are in actuality carried out by the 3 modes of material nature. Now, there's other factors involved. There's who we are. There's the soul. Shh. Good luck. There's the soul. There's material nature. And there's another factor involved in this, and it's in Bhagavad Gita. It's time. Time is not just, tick, tick of a clock. Time is an energy. Kala Shakti, it's called. Shakti means energy. You picked up on that already? Shakti. Shakti means energy. And time energy moves stuff. Time, so there's living entity, there's material nature, and there's time. And then those are eternal, according to Bhagavad Gita teaching. Living entity is eternal. Material nature, it gets pushed around, but the energy is eternal. It's neither created nor destroyed, just like Einstein said. The Vedas say the same thing. Matter is neither created nor destroyed. It undergoes transformation of state, but the material nature is material nature is material nature. Sometimes and sometimes, but it's just material nature getting moved around. And time is also eternal, and it moves stuff around. And then you get activity, because material nature is kind of like remote control. There's 3 modes: goodness, passion, ignorance. And largely, people in this, I hope you don't mind getting a big picture of Bhagavad Gita and stuff. That's good. Okay. We'll go. I'm going to go just 3 minutes to Vedic cosmology, and according to Vedic cosmology, the planets, there's lower, middle, and upper planets. In the upper planets, mode of goodness. In this middle planetary region where we are, passion. And down below, ignorance. Heaven and hell and where we are. There's further detail. There's 7 lower, 7 upper, making 14 planetary systems, but aside it has these ranges. Down, mode of ignorance. Up, mode of goodness. And we're in the passion place. Madhye tishtanti rajasa, in the language of Bhagavad Gita. It's right in Bhagavad Gita. It's a place where people are really intensely absorbed in fruitive work. Fruitive work means you do something to get something. And what Bhagavad Gita is advising is don't do something to get something. You do something in a mode of goodness idea or purpose. You do something for purification. You do something because it ought to be done. And you don't do some other things that ought not to be done. Those in the mode of goodness, they maintain a standard of purity and elevated consciousness. And those who are in the mode of passion, they work very intensely to get stuff. You do something to get something. Mode of passion, fruitive work. And that all 3 of those modes, we'll read the verse one more time. False ego is operating. What's false ego? According to the Bhagavad Gita conception. False ego is one of the coverings of the soul. There's the gross one, the body. And then there's the subtle one. It's also another covering. And it's a covering. It's not who we are, but it's a covering of who we are. And one of those coverings is mind. Another one is material intelligence. And another one is our dear friend, false ego. And it's not who we are, but it's who we think we are. And influenced by false ego, one thinks oneself to be the cause of action, which in fact is not being caused by us, nor is it being caused by your false ego. It's being carried out by the modes of nature. We have a role to play, but we're not creating action. I'm going to move on. It's a little bit of a puzzle, but the puzzle pieces should fit together. So we're going to go on to chapter 15. Chapter 5, verse number 14. It's the page number 241. This little girl's a dancer, huh? She's got everyone's attention. She's really good at it. Okay, if you're at page 241, we're going to read this next one. It's saying something similar, but a little further. The embodied spirit, that's us, master of the city of his body, 3 things. Does not create activities, nor does he induce people to act, nor does he create the fruits of action. All this is enacted by the modes of material nature. So if you're not doing any one of those 3 things, then what are you doing? Because it's the 3 things are acting, causing others to act, and creating the fruits of your action. Think about it. If you nix all those 3 things, then what do? We act, we're inducing other people to act, and we're creating fruits of our work through our actions. But Krishna is saying, no. Well, what's the yes? The yes is it's being carried out by the modes of material nature. Now, there's another verse which we're not going to read, but Krishna says, we are situated on a machine made of material energy. Just like a car is a machine. You get in your car and you're driving along at whatever it is, 30 miles an hour, and you speed up to 50 miles an hour. You're just sitting there. The machine is moving, and so you're moving, but you're just sitting there. The body is like a machine. It's moving, but it's moving because it's material nature. It's moving by the modes of material nature. And the living entity isn't doing any of those things. Working, causing others to work, or creating fruits of work. It's all being carried out by material nature. So this isn't nihilism. It doesn't say you don't exist or something like that. So now we're going to go on to one more verse. Chapter 18. The page number is 671, I think. No, 670. So there's a topic. We'll go back a few verses. We'll go back to page 668. Text 11. It is indeed impossible for an embodied being to give up all activities, but he who renounces the fruits of action is called one who has truly renounced. For one who is not renounced the threefold fruits of action, desirable, undesirable, and mixed, accrue after death. But those who are in the renounced order of life have no such results to suffer or enjoy. O mighty armed Arjuna, according to the Vedanta, there are 5 causes for the accomplishment of all action. Now, before it was said the modes of material nature, but now it's going to expand to 5. Now learn these from me. Here they are. There's 5. The place of action, or the body. The performer, that's us. The various senses, like working senses, legs, arms, etc. The many different kinds of endeavor, and ultimately the supersoul. These are the 5 factors of action. So we have a role to play. First of all, we just exist, but you can just exist and you don't get action. So the existing entity, the soul, has to make some endeavor, like, get up and walk across the room. Some people can't get up and walk. They don't have the power of locomotion in their legs. So you get a wheelchair. But the power of locomotion is with the person. You have to make some endeavor. Even if somebody pushes the wheelchair, there's some endeavor involved in any action. If it's not you making the action, it's someone making. Otherwise, there's no action. Some endeavor is required. So it's 5 things. The main function this is Bhagavad Gita teaching. The main function that we have is make some endeavor. Because we exist as spirit soul. And at least while we're in this body, it may, it's eventually going to be kaput. But while we have one, we have one. So there's the place of action. There's the senses for doing things. There's the soul. There's the endeavor of the soul. And then ultimately, the sanctioning person, the supreme soul. Bhagavad Gita taught this earlier in the 6th chapter with this. Within the heart, there's 2 entities. One is the individual spark, and the other is the Paramatma, who is sanctioning, seeing, and permitting or sanctioning. And it's a combination. We can't get up and walk across the floor if Super Soul doesn't sanction. We get up and walk across the floor. Power of locomotion is taken away. You can't walk. So you have the other four, but if the one is not functioning, the super soul doesn't sanction. You can't do anything. And this the sanction of super soul is to sanction material nature. And material nature moves under the force. One of the influences of super soul is time. It takes time to walk from point A to point B across the floor to do anything. It's not just, measurements with a stopwatch or a clock or something. It's a according to Bhagavad Gita, it's a Shakti. It's a power of super soul. Time moves things. I like the concept. We're subject to time. And when time's up, time's up. You can't say, well, wait a minute, I have some unfinished business. When time's up, it's up. You're out of here. Somebody can prolong life a little bit, but when time's up, it's up. And you can perfect your motor skills and become faster to move from point A to point B. But it still takes time. And it takes the sanction of the super soul. And it takes some endeavor on the part of the individual soul and material nature to cooperate. Those are the 5 factors of action. So I wanted to keep it a little challenging. Like the topic is, who's the doer? And we're hearing the first verse that we read, we're not the doer. False ego makes us think we're the doer. And we certainly think we're the doer. And we talk that way. I mean, just like this little explanation of this building and how it came in Shastakrit's care and how he's developing it, and maybe I can get somebody that can help him develop it further. And so we're talking like we're doing something. But ultimately, it's material nature and the sanction of super soul. Because without sanction of super soul, nothing happens. Some endeavor is needed. That's the part that we play. So the yoga practice, Bhagavad Gita teaching is, make our endeavor that's in harmony with what super soul wants, what God wants. It's quite simple. Recognize that everything. I was hearing just this morning a lecture Prabhupada was speaking from Srimad Bhagavatam. Just one thing. Understand everything that exists, God is the proprietor. And your life is happy. If you try to make something that's your property, that's God's property, you're not going to be happy. Because you're a criminal. It's not lawful. Lawful is everything is God. So we engage with the energy around us, recognizing it's God's arrangement for us to do some service to Him, and we use our senses, and we use the paraphernalia of His service in His service, and when you align your endeavor with the will of the Supreme, you have a happy life. And you don't align your endeavors with the will of the Supreme, you have an unhappy life. It's just like an endless struggle. And not only in this life, but lifetime after lifetime. And it's just, I'll end with this. It's a very common thing. It's my observation. It's a very common thing for people who are on a journey, like we're all on a journey to some degree or another, searching for happiness, the journey of searching for happiness. And we're looking for, an ultimate happiness, some of us. It's like a weight that's holding us down, and that is our fruitive tendency. Our dear friend false ego makes us think that we're going to make things happen. And then when we make things happen, we'll be happy. I'm going to do it. It's very common vernacular in the world that we live in today, without elaborating. So according to Bhagavad Gita, that's a weight around your ankle, the big weight in a chain, and it keeps you from moving towards the life's real goal. So how do you cut that chain? How do you break this affinity for thinking and guided by false ego, thinking I'm the doer. I'm creating stuff, I'm doing stuff, I'm going to do it better, and so forth and so on. And material life. How do you cut that tendency? Well, I'll just conclude. Knowledge has a cutting power. It's like a sword that can cut. And it can cut right through false ego. Because it's the false ego that keeps that knot tight. It takes, you have to have your receiver on, and they have to be hearing a broadcast that's transcendental knowledge. Because otherwise, the knot's going to stay. False ego knot is very stubborn. So even moving into spiritual endeavor, that fruitive tendency carries on. The false ego tendency carries on. It's really hard to let go. But how is through knowledge and detachment. And the purpose of knowledge detachment is not just to be detached, like I don't care, kind of detached, but detached from the misconceptions that are obstacles for spiritual progress, so that I can have the proper conception. When the obstacle is removed, then you can see properly. When you can see properly, the path of loving service to the Supreme Person, it's wide open. It is very, very joyful. Joyfully performed. Tushanticha Ramanticha. Very joyful. So I'll leave it to your imagination. This earlier discussion, I've been reading this Bhagavad Gita for 52 years, and trying to live my life by it. And it's one thing when it's just like a new concept. It's another thing when you're carrying it within your heart and live your life accordingly, because it takes a while to go from the head to the heart. But once you've understood the concept and it's in your heart, the world, the world that you experience doesn't necessarily change, but the way you experience the world changes. And that's the like the advertisement, the marketing message. Your experience of life will change, and it does. I mean, I can say from my experience, it does. And then when you have that nice change of experience, it's natural you want to share it with other people, especially people that want to know. I mean, there's some people that don't want to know, and there's some people that want to know. So it's kind of nice to get together with people that want to know and discuss that which is going to help them get to what they want to know, and that's Bhagavad Gita. So I'll just summarize. A big obstacle, a really big one, it's like a stain that's hard to clear, is the false ego tendency of fruitive work. That's how Prabhupada calls it, fruitive work. Do something to get something, and you carry that into your spiritual path to do something to get something. Then you're still the center. God's not at the center yet, because you're doing something to get something. And in spiritual life, God's at the center, and you're engaging in service to Him with His paraphernalia. And you're using your senses, and you're using your body, and you're using your endeavors in alignment with what's pleasing to Krishna. That's the topmost rung of the yoga ladder, by the way. And if you want to read, it's maybe another time, the very last verse of chapter 6 of Bhagavad Gita, 641 Bhagavad Gita. The topmost yoga, and this yoga ladder, it has two things, what your body does and what your mind does. Mind absorbed in Krishna, body engaged in activities for the pleasure of Krishna. Topmost yoga. So the gross and the subtle coverings aligned with Krishna's pleasure. Topmost yoga. And all the other yoga systems to help one get there. And then the middle 6 chapters, starting with chapter 7, explains how to. How you do it. How do you do that? The mind and the body in alignment with Krishna's pleasure. How do you do it? Because I'm not there yet. I've got this obstacle of my false ego telling me I'm the creator of my activities and the enjoyer of the results of those activities. That's what my false ego's been telling me for not just this lifetime, but lots and lots of lifetimes. And I'm like, I'm very accustomed to it. It's very, very natural for me. Although it's a diseased condition, it's natural. So what's life like without false ego? And how do you get there? How do you align the mind and the body with the pleasure of Krishna in loving service? That's the middle 6 chapters. It's a really good book. Very, very practical. The concepts, the language of the concepts is a little different. That's okay. You become accustomed to the language of the concepts and then you bring the concepts inside. And your experience changes. Your sense of being connected. Yoga means linking with the Supreme. Your sense of connection with the Supreme starts to blossom. Like a seed that sprouts and grows and grows. And it's a very natural process. The other is unnatural. So let's see if there's some discussion. What time is it? Yeah? 7:05. Okay. Well. Comments or questions or complaints?
Hare Krishna Maharaj. This is we are online here on ISKCON Atlanta. Are you able to hear me, Maharaj?
I can hear you. Turn
Thank
the
you so much.
speaker a little this way.
For the wonderful class, a Bhagavad Gita class, enlightening. Maharaj,
Move the
from our side, I
microphone.
do see that we have one hand raised. There is a question from Amarendra Prabhu. So,
Question
Amarendra
from
Prabhu,
whom? Move the microphone.
Amarendra.
Go ahead. Go ahead, speak.
Yes. Go ahead, Amarendra Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much for such a beautiful presentation. It's oftentimes quite a complicated, complex topic, but I really loved some take-homes from this class. I really liked how you spoke about the 3 modes with respect to the 3 colors. And then you also spoke about the 3 works of creation, maintenance, and destruction.
Okay.
And then you spoke about the 3 planetary systems,
Yes, I
the
did.
upper, middle, and lower.
You're a good listener.
And then you substantiated all of that with the 3 verses. So I really like that. And also the example of how the car moves, but the person in the car doesn't move. So I think that was a beautiful point. I really liked it. I also liked your point about we are not the false ego, but it is what we think we are. So I really like that too. So if I can just maybe reflect upon some take-homes, I think the 4 things that you mentioned was we have a role to play, point
Yes.
number 1.
Yes.
And point number 2, we have to try to overcome the fruitive mentality.
Yes.
And point number 3, we also have to understand that we are not the only doer. We are one out of many. And the position of the super soul cannot be forgotten.
That's right.
And the 4th is we overcome false ego by constantly staying in touch with spiritual broadcast messages so that we constantly remember them. So is my understanding and my reflection in the right direction of understanding, Maharaj?
Thank you for asking that question. I'd like to edit number 3. There's not multiple doers, there's multiple causes of action. And because in the Sanskrit, one of the word is karta, and karta means doer. So that's the soul. But the soul, if you don't make an endeavor, then stuff doesn't happen. So another cause is endeavor. But if you don't have the material nature, then your endeavor is not going to be very effective causal wise. So material nature is another. So there's 5. I'm just editing number 3. The language you used is there are several doers, and I'm just editing it several causes. The ultimate doer is the sanctioning supreme, super soul, the Lord of the heart.
Right.
And then there's another doer, and that's a secondary doer, not the primary doer. And that's the endeavor that we make. That's our part. We just endeavor. And if there's a result, it's not in our hand. It's in the sanction of super soul and the other 3 causes of action. But ultimately, it's super soul. So we're dependent doers.
Right. Thank you. Thank you so much, Maharaj. Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Nice little
Thank you.
summary. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amarendra Prabhu, for your wonderful observations on the class, and thank you, Maharaj, for further clarifying some of those topics. Maharaj, we have one more hand raised here from Vineet Prabhu. Vineet Prabhu, if you are ready, you may go ahead.
And can we do this after we take this question or comment? I'd like to go into the room and we can do some back and forth, because I
Yes,
don't want
ma'am.
the online people to feel left out, and I don't want the in the room people to feel left out.
Yes, Maharaj.
So we do
When-
some back and forth, please.
Of course.
Thank
Yes,
you.
ma'am.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, please accept my respectful obeisance. Thank you so much for this wonderful, quick summary of this.
I recognize
concept
the
of-
voice. You recognize the voice? You're calling in from Seattle.
Yes, Maharaj.
Ah.
Thank you for recognizing me. Maharaj, my question is maybe very straightforward. We may theoretically accept that the supreme consciousness is the ultimate doer, the ultimate sanctioning power,
Yes.
but it is
The non-doer but sanctioner. Very well spoken.
yes, Maharaj. And the idea, the confusion that one may have is, I may theoretically accept that there is a sanctioning authority, but I see that if I don't do something about my current scenario, nothing's happening.
Yes, you
So-
have a role to play.
So I guess, how do we move from this consciousness of I am the doer to the consciousness of I'm not the ultimate doer, but I have to still endeavor? Because
You-
as a soul, I still feel like giving up or doing everything the way I want.
Well, isn't there a third option besides those 2?
I guess Maharaj is a newcomer.
You're
to
the
spirituality.
nimitta. The answer is, I'm just teasing you. You're the instrument. I have a role to play. What's my role? I make some endeavor. What should my endeavor be like? It should be the instrument of the will of the Supreme. Align my endeavors with my body and with my mind. Align my endeavors with the will of the Supreme. In that way, I become the instrument of the Supreme.
And when you say become an instrument of the Supreme, does that imply, like in being very practically, practically speaking, are we talking about someone who represents that supreme?
Yes.
Like a spiritual teacher?
No, well, yeah, let's just say, take something that's important to you, or important to some people. What may be important to some people is green, or, being eco-friendly. And so that's a worldly terminology. But what does it mean to Krishna? You study the scriptures, you become familiar with what Krishna's system is, and you align yourself with Krishna's system because that's a value that you hold. But you're not the doer. Krishna's the doer. You become an instrument of what Krishna wants, and then things happen in alignment with what Krishna wants because you're just being an instrument. You're making an endeavor. You're not a blob or a passive non-entity. You're making some endeavor. Let your endeavors, it takes some refinement to have a clear picture of what Krishna's will is or desire is. That's what, the word dharma is, occupational duty. My occupational duty is to know what Krishna wants according to my nature and do those things and not do the other things. Let's take speech. Let my speech be that which is pleasing to Krishna. What's pleasing to Krishna? You read in Bhagavad Gita what's pleasing to Krishna. Speech that's pleasing to Krishna. It's truthful, and it's done in consideration of the relationship I have with other people and how my speech is going to have an impact on other people. So that's, there's modern language for all those things. Empathic communication, it's called. But, speak the truth, but empathically. And that's Bhagavad Gita 17:15. So with all features of life, if one becomes conversant with basic texts, devotional texts, one will get a more and more refined understanding of what's pleasing to Krishna, and you align yourself with that, and you endeavor accordingly.
Thank you, Mara.
Okay? That way we're the instrument, nimitta. You know the term. Here, we have someone in the room. We're doing an alternating program here. Can you give him the microphone? No, but for the people online.
Namaskar, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. I have this question from my own personal experience
Okay.
that my mind, my body, I often see it behaving under the influence of the three modes of nature that you
Yeah.
goodness, passion, and ignorance.
Mm.
And the more I become aware of it, I also see that each of these modes have some consequences on my state of mind, on my
Exactly.
body.
Oh, yeah.
Some of these are undesirable. Sometimes they leave me with guilt, with remorse, and the more I observe, the more I desire for a change within myself. But I see that sometimes the modes of nature are so strong, they could be so overwhelming that even fighting against them could be very futile. So, what is the way out that either I move at least towards goodness or I just come out of it?
No, neither. I mean, excuse me for being so abrupt.
You understand my
I
question now,
understand
so
your question.
please.
You know the verse, and I'll say it in Sanskrit because you know the verse in Sanskrit. Daivihi yesha gunamayi mama maya dharati. That's the first part. It's very big struggle against the modes of material nature. It's overwhelming sometimes. Now, what's the alternative besides struggle and get beat up? Mam eva ye prapadyante.
Come to
Maya metam. You can easily cross beyond that struggle by taking shelter. You know the verse? You don't know the
No,
verse?
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
Can you please tell me what the verse number is?
You look it up. I don't know the verse number.
Okay. So,
I'll find it later if someone doesn't find it right now.
okay. Yeah,
Daivihi esha gunamayi mama maya doratyaya. It's simple. First part. It's very difficult struggle against material nature. Material nature wins. Very difficult struggle. But there's the good news. What's the good news? Those who take shelter of me can easily cross beyond. The ocean shrinks to the water in the hoofprint of a calf
Okay.
by surrender to Krishna. I thought so. 714.
7:14.
714. I don't know the page number, but chapter 7, text 14.
Yeah.
Chapter 7, text 14. So the method, that's the short, is to say, those who surrender unto me can easily cross beyond it. So that process of surrender, that's the middle 6 chapters of Bhagavad Gita.
Mhm.
That's the how-to section.
Mhm.
How to get to that stage where the body and the mind are aligned
Mhm.
with what Krishna wants. That surrender in devotion starts with chapter 7, goes through chapter 12.
Okay. Like how to surrender? in
Yeah, the
practice?
how-to.
How to, okay. Do you mind just giving a very quick?
Very quick 6-chapter summary. Well, a very quick
How to.
6-chapter summary
Mhm.
is associate with those who are engaged like that, and it'll become very easy for you to do like that. It's called Sangha, right? By association with those who are engaged, their body and their mind, in dedicated service to Krishna, it's easier. You can just see what they're doing, feel their energy, and tag along, and become an apprentice of someone who is already absorbed, and they'll give teachings along the path. That's the best.
Okay.
Make sure, because they'll also make sure, let's not get distracted from the goal. Let's not go over this way or go over that way. We can go explore a little bit, but let's stay focused on where we're going, what the goal is.
Thank you.
Okay. We have another question. How about online? We're doing some turns. Do we have something online?
Yes, Maharaj. I'm just checking. Dear devotees, if there's anyone who would like to ask a question, you may raise
Because
your
we have
hand.
some people in the room with their hand up.
Yes, Maharaj. We don't have any online, so you may go ahead. In the
Okay,
room.
let's go on. Let's give her the microphone.
Hare Krishna.
Hi, Krishna.
My question is, I'm
You
still.
play cartels very nicely, by the way.
Thank you. I was trying my best. That means a lot. My question is, I'm still fairly new to everything, like the reading and all the material. It can get kind of overwhelming. Like there's so many names and so many
Yes,
stories, and I was just wondering, like, do you personally have any advice to keep from like being overwhelmed, or kind of helps
Sure.
you digest the reading
Sure.
material a little easier?
Sure. Really simple. Don't worry about the information part, worry about the heart part. Read from your heart, and the information, you just get accustomed to it. It's really simple. I mean, the details and details and details and details, there's no end to it. And when you get that far, then there's more details and more details. It's like an ocean that doesn't have a bottom.
There's many names that I've never heard before, and I don't even know their faces.
That's
and
okay. That's okay. No sweat.
Through more reading more, I guess it'll become easier.
That kind of information you become familiar with, and it's not what the essence is anyway. The essence is the essence. So, read with your heart, and you'll capture the essence, even if you don't understand all the names and all the thises and that's. So when you come across, just like I've been explaining, I wanted to explain anyways, fruitive tendency. So that doesn't have like lots of jargon. There's karma and attachment to the fruits of work, and that kind of language we're not so familiar hearing. But you listen to the concept, or let it enter your heart, and then it's fine. And somebody else may come along and say a little differently, but you got the concept. And then you try to live your life according to that, which is the essence. And the names come in course of time. It's like learning anything.
It's not instantaneous.
Do you drive a car?
Do you have a car?
Do you drive a car?
Yes.
Okay. When you first started driving a car, did you feel clumsy?
Yes.
But after some time, it's like you don't even think about it. Like that. And that's a motor skill, but this is also like a language skill. And in the course of time, you become very familiar with all the terminology and names and this and that. It becomes important because the persons mentioned and the terminology mentioned, they have their function. But it's not going to dip. It's not going to change the goalpost. It's not going to change the essence. The essence is the essence. And try to capture the essence. Read from your heart. And whatever you capture in your heart, that's what's important.
That's very nice. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else in the room here? Online. Okay. We have three different audiences. We have the Atlanta Temple audience. We have this audience. And there's some other people listening audience.
This question is by Bhaskar Prabhu. If doing something to get something is an indication of mode of passion,
Yes, it is.
and doing something because it ought to be done is goodness, is the action of the people in mode of goodness purposeless?
Purposeless? No, there's a purpose. Purification. And acting according to what is right. I don't steal because you don't steal. You don't steal. You don't even think about don't stealing. You don't steal because you don't steal. But some people don't care at all about that. But mode of goodness is you care about that. So it's a purpose. You're just living your life the way a person should live their life. You don't lie, etc. No, there's lots of people that lie. There's lots of people that do lots of things that are not in the mode of goodness. But there's a purpose. Let's take cleanliness. That's a mode of goodness standard of life. You're clean because to be clean. But cleanliness is next to godliness. And truthfulness, abiding by the truth, is a universal principle in spiritual teachings. Abide by the truth. Don't deviate from the truth. Be truthful. When you give your word, you keep your word. So be careful what words you give, because when you give your word, you keep your word. That's life of goodness. It's purposeful. Next.
There's a follow-up question by Bhaskar Prabhu. Is the thought, if I align my endeavor with the will of the Lord, it will lead to happiness, still in the mode of passion?
Yes.
Because it still has something.
It's mode of goodness, but there's a tinge. It's still in the modes of nature. That is to say, there's goodness that's not tinged. That's the spiritual world. You do things out of love, not because, for any other reason. And when there's some other reason I'm going to do this because I get something, then that at least to some degree, there's a tinge. Go ahead.
This question is by Srida Prabhu. Although we say Krishna is the doer, and it seems to me that Krishna is primarily the sanctioner,
Yes.
but not the doer, in the sense the action is performed by modes of nature.
Yes, that's correct. He's not Krishna is the doer. Krishna is the sanctioner. He doesn't lift a pinky. He doesn't even nod his head. He just gives his permission. He sanctions. And without his sanctions, nothing happens. Chapter 13 Bhagavad Gita teaches that. Upadrashta anumantacha. He oversees and he permits those two functions. He doesn't do. He's not the doer. He oversees. He's the witness. And he sanctions. Okay?
a follow-up question. Only in pure devotee's case, Krishna personally does the things, not through any of his agencies. Please correct my understanding.
I couldn't follow. Could you follow what he's saying?
Only in pure devotee's case, Krishna personally does the things instead of going through his agencies.
Well, even with his pure devotees, he's working through the agency of his internal potency. And for those who are not his pure devotees, he's working through the agency of his external energy. God has unlimited energies, unlimited spiritual and material energies. And he's working through his energies. He's directly involved through his internal energy with his devotees. He's directly involved, and indirectly involved through the external energy, material energy, this material nature, what we were reading about, the machine.
Next question is by Shyama Gopika Mataji. May I know how to dedicate our material activities to earn and maintain our body to Krishna?
Read Bhagavad Gita, the answer is there. I mean, your question is the middle 6 chapters of Bhagavad Gita is the answer. But a starting point, a fundamental starting point is these verses we just read. Then the obstacle is attachment to the notion that I'm meant to be the enjoyer of my activities, instead of the Supreme Krishna is meant to be the enjoyer of my activities. That's the big obstacle. Big, 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 big one. I mean, it takes different shapes and forms, but that's the big one. It's a big mountain. So once you address that mountain by knowledge, that's not the reality of things, and detachment. I let go of that idea. And then you have to take shelter of another idea. What's the other idea? I'm meant for the happiness of Krishna. That's who I am. As spirit soul, I'm meant for loving exchange with Krishna. That's who I am. That's my happiness. But you can't take that without letting go of the misconception. So knowledge and detachment. And then love. Without attachment to the notion of being the enjoyer of stuff. Next. That's it. How are we doing in the room? Anyone? Way in the back. Can you come forward? Can you come forward? The microphone cable isn't going to reach all the way over there.
Just have a question on the just now you answered a question about truthfulness.
About truthfulness.
Yeah. I'm trying to understand this. Like there's many times where you hear people might say I'm lying, but I'm lying for Krishna. Or I'm doing this for Krishna. What's
Yeah.
your view on that?
My view on people saying that they're doing something for Krishna?
Yeah, if they say it, I'm telling this, like, we're supposed to be truthful. And if we are doing it, how do we understand, like,
If someone being not truthful and saying they're doing it for Krishna, is that what your question is?
Yes.
That's what your question is?
Yes, sir.
Well, that's not for Krishna. I mean, unless Krishna has directly sanctioned, like in the case, I mean, there's the exceptions. Yudhishthira being told to say something. But the rule is not the exception. The rule is you speak the truth.
Thank you.
So is that doing it for Krishna? The answer is no, because that's not the standard.
Thank you.
Abide by truth. Okay, looks like we're done. And it's time for something, whatever the next something is. Prashadam, right? Your wife plays mridanga. So do I. Okay. Okay, quickly. Okay.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
How
Thank you so much.
anything there in Atlanta, or we're all wound up?
Are we good to go, Maharaj? I don't see anyone with their hands raised. I
Okay.
think we're good on the side.
Okay.
So thank you so much, Maharaj. We'd just like to thank you for everything on behalf of ISKCON Atlanta, for giving us your association and enlivening us with these wonderful classes, both in person and at the temple and online. We really are very grateful to you for being with us, and we certainly look forward to having your association in the future again. So thank you so much.
You're a very gracious MC. Thank you.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.